Hello, I'm Nathan, and I'm going to show you how to paint some flowers today. So I was walking around the neighborhood the other day because it was beautiful outside, and I took some photos of some flowers. Thought this would make for a pretty good subject for a painting. Typically when I paint, I'm using a photo as a reference. And the important thing to remember when you're painting from a photo is that the photo has to be high quality. So it's a clear image and the composition is nice. So it's balanced out and there's a subject in the photo that really catches your attention. So I thought the colors in the flowers really were interesting. It would make for an interesting painting. So the first thing I want to do, since this is going to be an acrylic painting, I want to do just a rough drawing to map out the basic details in my photo. I don't want to worry too much about exact placement because I will paint over all these lines. But I do want a general idea of where things are. So this bush in the top right corner, that's a pretty big thing in the photo that I want to make sure I have. And I'm just I'm working quickly. Saw that it started about halfway across. The top of the grass kind of goes off the page, so I'm going to lower it a little bit just to add some depth. The more layers you have in your painting, the more interesting it'll be. Alright, and then the edge of the grass over here kind of curves down. I'm working quickly. I don't want to worry too much about every little detail. If you want, you can draw in every flower you see in there if it helps you. I just want to do just a basic drawing here. Get those yellow ones in there. Just kind of mapping out the boundaries of where these different bunches of flowers are. That way I don't stray too far away from the original photo. I'm looking more at the photo than I am at the canvas. That way, a little more accurate. If I was staring completely at the canvas, I would start to forget what kind of details I have in my photo. So I'm looking mostly at that photo. There's that yellow that comes down here, working really quickly. If you would rather draw in more of those details, that is completely okay. These purple ones, just a basic idea. And that yellow and the orange. I think this bush comes down a little lower. Not a big deal. Something like that. And that's about all I want to map out in my drawing. And we're ready to paint. Okay, so I want to talk about the materials I'm going to use before I start. So with the brushes, I always have a bigger brush, big flat brush, a medium one, it's more of a round brush, and then I have a really small brush. For the majority of the painting, I'll use the bigger brush. With the paints, I have acrylic paint. So I have yellow, green, orange, red, blue, white, and black. Now the orange and the green, of course, you could just mix. You know, the orange, you could do red and yellow to make orange, blue and yellow to make green. So those are the colors. So I want to choose the colors I see the most of first. So I see a lot of green. And green is also one of the background colors. So that works out. So all I want to do, I'll try to make sure that you can see as much of my mixing as can. So I'm going to take the green and it's pretty dark compared to my photo. I'm trying to match those colors. I'm going to take some of that yellow and I'm mixing it to make it look a little brighter. And you just kind of add and change it until you like what you see. I like that green. Might be kind of hard to see on the camera. And I want to map out this area in the grass. As I put that down, I really like what green I came up with. I might put a little blue in there because it's a little yellow. It's a little yellow. So I'll take a little bit of my blue, just a little bit, mixed in. I like what that looks like. Oftentimes you'll see me mix right onto the canvas. That way it's a quicker process and you get some interesting textures and different colors that way. Just quickly blocking that in. I'm liking that. Again, it's a little dark. Just a little. Might even take a little bit of white. Just to lighten it up a bit. A little bit more blue. This is a continual process. I'm always adding this and that until I'm happy with the color I get. And acrylic's really nice because you can paint over whatever you did really easily. So any mistakes you might have made can be corrected pretty quickly and easily. Okay. Like that. And I'll probably paint over that with another layer just so I make sure I have covered my canvas completely. Alright, the very top of there is quite a bit of yellow. I want to make it look like it was a sunny day. A little more yellow. With that white in there. All I'm doing is adding different colors in there till I'm happy with what I have. Doing quick little strokes, that way I can get some interesting textures. Alright, that's pretty nice. I like what that looks like. There's some more green over in that bush. It is definitely more yellow and more white. So I want to take the green I already came up with for the grass and I want to paint the base of the bush that green. Alright, working quickly. I see a little bit more blue in that green. It's getting a little yellow. I want to make sure I match those colors fairly well. And this is based on my own tastes. So if you want to choose your own colors and do something completely different, that is great. This should look like your painting. I don't want you to do just an exact copy of mine because that wouldn't be very much fun. So feel free to make your own artistic choices and do a little different than what I'm doing. And now I want to take my yellow, because that bush is a lot more yellow than the grass is. Take some white and yellow, especially near the top here. And that's even pretty yellow. That might need to be toned down by adding some white, maybe even a little black. I know that sounds crazy, but adding a little white and black, make that gray, tones it down, and it makes it look a lot more realistic. I know sometimes we think of gray as being an ugly color, but it really helps get those earth tones. If you find that your painting looks a little too cartoony, unrealistic, yeah, just tone down some of those colors a little bit. And that gray really helps. Colors in nature aren't quite as vivid as we might think. Take some more white. And if I get uneven colors, that's great actually, because I want some different textures, different values. I don't want it all to look exactly the same. Overlap into the grass a little bit. All right, I'm liking that. This blocking in part is going to seem pretty messy, because it is. I'm going to take some of the darker green, work that in a bit more. That's the great thing about acrylic, is that you can keep going back and forth and adjusting. Especially if you're using the same type of colors, and it won't get too muddy. I don't wash my brush that much unless I am going to change colors pretty drastically. And that's what I'm going to do right now. So I have that strip of white right at the top that I want to get rid of. I don't get too crazy with my cleaning, I just want to get most of the paint off. Okay, and I'm going to take my black, because I see that it's a very dark color up in the top, and I just want to cover up that white, overlap into the green. Don't leave any white spots showing. We want to cover that up, and this will send that background even farther back. We're just adding some depth to it. I'm using plenty of paint, that way I cover up all those white parts in the canvas. If some of my green gets into my black, that is okay. It'll just make it a little more interesting looking. Okay. Right, maybe some black in there. See some shadows in that bush. Okay, now I want to start blocking in where those bright colors in my flowers are. I'm gonna clean my brush again, because if I have any color on my brush when I do those flowers, it's gonna really make those colors muddy. And I'm using that big brush. The main reason I use the big brush most of the time is so I don't overwork the painting. Okay, so the first color I want to start with is the yellow. I'm just taking that yellow just straight from the tube, and I'm looking at my photo, just blocking in basic shapes of where I think those flowers are. Just basic shapes. I'm making them bigger than I see in the photo because I want to overlap other colors in there. Taking that yellow. I'm not worried about making them exactly like where the photo details are. I'm just blocking in basic shapes everywhere I see the yellow. See yellow up here. Okay, now I want to take a little bit of my red, my orange. There's definitely some orange in there, in those yellows. Take my orange. My brush is still pretty dirty with the yellow, and that is great. Makes it kind of a yellowy orange. And I see some different shadows. I'm just adding a few. I'm not worrying too much about where I put these shadows, but I know that the darker part of the yellow is going to have an orange tint to it. Just adding some textures to make it look interesting. Working quickly. Let's see. It's pretty good. Oh, I missed some yellow way over here. As you can see, my brush is dirty from that orange, which is completely okay. Just blocking him in. Okay, smoothing them out a little bit here and there as I go. Just adding little shapes. I see some yellows, add them in there. Let's see. And I'm referring to my photo quite a bit. The more I look at the photo, the more accurate my details will be. I'll overlap that yellow into the green. All right, now let's go to our orange flowers. So I'm gonna take a lot more of that orange color. Okay, and just looking at where I'm seeing the orange. That's a pretty red orange. I want to add some more yellow. There we go. If you're not happy with your colors, that's all right. Just stop and add to what you have. You can adjust as you go. If our colors are a little different than the photo, that's fine. I'm overlapping into that yellow. We're gonna add some green to fill out the white spots. Okay, some orange over here. And I'm going quickly. You can always pause this or replay it. Thing about acrylic is you do want to move kind of quickly because your paints will start to dry and it'll be a lot harder to mix and blend on your canvas. I'm going to take some more yellow into this right here. Just a little more. I don't want all the colors to be perfectly even. I want there to be some differences in here. It adds to the depth and detail in my flowers. Okay, there's some orange up here. Remember, I want to make the flowers bigger than what I want them to eventually turn out to be, because I want to overlap stuff. There's some orange up here. Okay, that's looking good. Okay, and I want to do my purple next. So I want to clean my brush off, because that color is going to be drastically different than what I was just using. If I were to mix purple and orange on my brush, it would get really muddy looking. So I want to make sure my brush is nicely cleaned off. And what I want to do, I want to take my purple, or sorry, my blue, and my red, mix them together. It's going to be a little darker than what I want, so I probably want to add some white. The purple in the photo is more on the blue side. You just have to take some red, take some blue, adjust until you like what you see. And then I want to take some white, maybe a little bit more blue. Just keep going until you like what you see. And I see some purple right here. Be careful not to mix in with my orange too much, because it'll get kind of brown like that. So I see that I started to get kind of brown when I was trying to paint over the orange. So I'll leave that alone until it dries a bit more. But I'll come down here. There's some big areas of purple. Maybe I'll add a little bit more blue in there. Some white. A little bit more blue. Just keep adding different colors until you like what you see. I'll stay away from that yellow until it's a little drier. Just getting that purple in there. Now I'm going to go back in with my green. So I wash my brush. And I'm taking that yellow just to make a nice yellowy green. I'm going to use this for the leaves and the flowers. It's okay if the green mixes a little bit with the colors and the flowers. And I just want to cover up any white I might have had. Try to save the white where your white flowers are going to be. So I just want to make little shapes, and I will touch up those flowers a little later. Just taking that green, going around. See, we're losing a little bit of the flowers. That's okay. That's why we made them a little bigger than what we want them to look like at the end. Just filling in the white parts around my flowers. Using the big brush still. At this point, you could go to one of the smaller brushes. I want to be careful around here because this is where my white flower is going to be. So I'm just going to paint around where I think they'll end up being. Covering up that white. And it's okay if that green mixes with the flower color, we'll touch up this as we go. I just want to make sure I'm covering up the white. Okay. I do want to make sure my grass or my leaves are darker than my flowers. That way those flowers really stand out. Okay, here's a lot of green right there. That purple is a little wet still. I think I'll leave that alone for now. Some green in here. As you can probably tell, I'm not making it look exactly like the photo, but I am using the photo as a reference. Just giving the idea of flower shapes. I'm going to try to leave that white alone where those flowers are going to be. But I can always paint over and adjust as I go. Some white up there. Right now I'm just trying to cover up all the white. If you find that your colors are getting muddy, let some of the paint dry on your canvas. You can always come back later. That muddiness is coming from the wet paint on the canvas mixing with the paint on your brush. Sometimes it gives us a color that is not very pretty. So all you have to do is let it dry and come back. Okay. Overlapping things. Go back in here and there. Okay, now I want to mix the brown. So what I want to do is wash my brush off again. And I want to take some orange or some yellow and red. Add a little bit of blue. Add a little bit of black. Add a little bit of white. A little bit of yellow. Brown is really a mixture of just about every color. Just kind of mixing all these colors together until I like what I see. It's getting close. A little bit black. Just kind of mixing a bunch of colors together. And I like the kind of brown I have right there. So to recap, I mixed my orange, or yellow and red, together with blue, yellow, black, and white. So really every color I have on my canvas other than the green. This makes a pretty good brown. And I want to block in where I see brown, where I see the dirt and the leaves. There's a big area over here of dirt, leaves. I want to go all the way over to the purple, all the way over. There we go. I like that. Let's keep going. I see there's a nice patch right there. I'm referencing the photo, but I'm not worried if it doesn't look exactly like the photo. That is okay. That goes up and over. That looks nice. If your brown isn't quite what you want, just keep adding different colors to it until you're happy with what you see. A lot of this comes with practice. You might even have a pre-mixed brown from a tube. That's great too. Cuts down on all the work you have to do. You just take it straight from the tube, and there you go. Alright, I want to work it into the green here. Cover up that white. Okay. Any other brown? Looks like that is just about it. Maybe a little bit down there. Okay. Now, the brown has a lot of different textures to it. We want it to look like there's leaves and everything in there, so I want to take some of the white, lighten up that brown a lot. Maybe add a little bit of yellow. Just a light color. And taking my big brush again, I just want to have a couple little areas in here, just adding some textures. I want to make it look like there's stuff in there, different leaves and twigs. Alright, I don't want to cover up all the brown I just put down. Just want to add some different textures. Not trying to recreate every twig and leaf in my photo. Just trying to add some interesting things here. Okay. And I like how that's turning out. Now what I want to do, clean that brush off a little bit, and I want to take some black, because there are some shadows I see in the dirt. Take that black and start to find some of those shadows. It's definitely a shadow that meets the grass. I'm going to dab it so it blends a little bit. Make it uneven. That's nice. Okay. Take some more black. Go up and over. There's a nice ridge where the grass and the dirt meet. I'll make sure I put that in there. Okay, that's looking pretty close. Just dab into the brown. till I like what I see. Just keep adding. Now I want to switch to the smaller brush. I want to start working on a few smaller details. That grass back here, I want to take that darker green, just straight green. Remember, we had to add yellow to make that a lighter green. And I see a few kind of shadowy areas. If that's too dark, I might add a little bit more yellow. There we go. And I'm just kind of scrubbing in some texture. Make it look like there's some grass in there. I don't want to draw every blade of grass, but I want to add a little bit of texture. Smooth it out a little bit. Like how that looks. Take a little bit more. You notice that green gets darker the closer it gets to the dirt. Okay, I like how that looks. Now that I have things mostly blocked in, I want to start working on the details. So I'm going to start up here and I'll work my way down. As soon as I finish all the detail right here that overlaps with the bush, then I can go onto the bush and then go even farther down the page. So I see a lot of little white flowers there at the very top. So I'm going to take just white with my smaller brush and I'm just dabbing little white flowers. There's some orange in there too. Just little white flowers overlapping into my grass. It's just little shapes. Just giving the idea of flowers. Okay, I like how that looks. Don't want to overdo it. Then I want to get the white off my brush and I want to go into the green. And a little bit of yellow too. And I want to put some green in there. I don't want to mix too much with the white, so I'm just kind of dabbing. It's a lot of paint. Alright. Making sure it's darker. Might add a little black even, just to really darken that green up. That way, looks like we got a few flowers in there. Makes it stand out. The green's gonna mix a little bit with the white, but that's okay. We just want there to be a little contrast there. So I like how that looks. Clean my brush a little bit. And I want to take my yellow and my orange and make a really yellowy orange and put in a few of those right there. Just dab them in there. Don't let them mix too much with the colors that are already wet. Just real quick. That way I have some orange on there. So I'm seeing some orange flowers. And I might come back and touch that up. And that's okay. Clean my brush. Now I want to tackle this bush right here. I want to start adding some details in there. For the most part, I have the highlights done. I might add a little bit more yellow. We'll see. I'll adjust as I go. But what I want to do is I want to add some green and some black together. And I want to start adding those shadows in there. So I'm doing just little strokes where I'm adding blades here and there. You might want to even go with a smaller brush than this. I might do that in a little bit. I want to make sure the bush is darker near the base, especially right around here. And there's a shadow right there. Just adding texture. Make sure it's lighter near the top, darker near the bottom. Gives it some form. That looks nice. Okay, I'm going to take a smaller brush, the smallest brush, this one right here, and I'm going to add a little bit of water to it. That way I can thin out the paint a little bit. I'm going to take my green, take my yellow, and take some white. Hopefully your canvas isn't quite as messy as mine, but it's okay if it is. Alright, and I'm just mixing the colors to like what I see. I'm going back and forth between a lot of colors. So there's a lot of color in this painting. Okay. I want to add a few, might need to add a little bit more white in there, a little bit more water. If the paint doesn't quite move around like you want it to, it needs to be a little bit more watered down. Just lightening it up. It's just green, yellow, and white. And I just want to take, yeah, there we go. Just adding a few highlights in here. You'll have to go back to the paint quite a bit. The little brushes don't hold that much paint. And I'm just doing little strokes just to get a few blades in there. A few blades of grass. Just giving the idea of some detail in there. Okay, I want it to overlap into the background. Taking that color again, overlap into what I see here. The more you overlap things, the more depth you get. It pushes that background even farther back. I'm liking how this is turning out. Let's see here. If I feel that I've added a little bit too many highlights, I'll just take my green, just a darker color than what I just used, a little bit less white, and maybe take my bigger brush just so it doesn't look quite as overworked. Just blend some of this out. And just going back and forth between colors. Till I like what I see. It's a constant process. Like that. You see I got a little bit of orange in my green. I like how that looks actually. It's kind of neat. Okay. Take some of my dark green, a little bit of my black. I'm just going back and forth between different colors. I'm losing some of my shadows, so I want to go back in there. Work in some of those darks. If I don't have the shadows in there, the highlights won't pop out nearly as much. Make sure this isn't just one blob of the same color. Just going around this bush, working in some texture until I'm happy with how it turns out. Okay. You can see I'm making really quick strokes. That way I'm not overthinking it too much. And I might go back in a little later and add a few more details. But right now I'm going to leave that alone. I like how that basically looks. Okay. And now there's a shadow underneath the bush into the dirt. So I'm going to clean my brush. And I want to take my orange, my blue, my yellow, mix it all together, take a little black, more black, make a nice dark brown, and then go in here, just work in some shadow. Just scrubbing it in. And I like how that looks. Maybe a little bit more black. Right there. Yeah. Okay. Work that in a bit. And now we can work our way down with more detail in the flowers. So the next little bit is just a little bit of that orange. So I want to take the green and break up this orange here to make it look like separate little flowers. That contrast will really make those colors pop. Take that, go around the yellow here, and I can always touch this up later if I accidentally cover up some stuff. I like how that's looking. Okay. A lot of this is going back and forth between a lot of colors. I'm taking the purple now, so blue and red, and white. And I see I missed a few purples up here. There we go. Trying to avoid making it look like a big blob of color. I want little shapes. Okay. I think I'm going to touch up the purple down here. Just add a bit more color. Since that green is dried, I can go back in now. Taking some white, adding some highlights in here. Right, that's pretty nice. Might darken up that purple up top just a bit. Yeah. Okay. Cleaning my brush. I want to add in those white flowers right here. So I'm just taking white, dabbing some little shapes, overlapping things I see. Just here and there. Okay. See some white over here. Just a little bit. The great thing about acrylic is you can go back and touch up things. Like right here, I want a little bit more white. Just a little bit more to make that stand out. Okay. And then there's some white down here. And it seems kind of funny to paint white on a white canvas. But we want a little bit of paint on there, so there's some textures, and that way I can overlap into what I painted behind it. Just to give it some shape. I like how that's looking. Okay. Now for the most part, I think my flowers are pretty well blocked in there. From now on, it's just a matter of adding some shadows and some highlights. So I'm going to start with my shadows. And the main thing that I'm going to do with shadows is in the leaves. So I'm going to take the green, I'm going to take the black, make a really dark green. And I want to just add a couple really dark spots just to make these flowers pop a little bit. Just here and there. Not everywhere, but just in a few spots to make those flowers really pop. Maybe in purple a bit. The darker the shadows, the more of those highlights will pop out. Might break that orange up a bit. A little bit. Right there. Just trying to break up some of these shapes a little to make them look like there's a few flowers in there. Okay. Over here it looks like we could use some dark. I'm just taking black and green and going in a few little areas just to add some contrast and a little bit more detail. I don't want everything to be the exact same shade or color. That's why I'm going kind of quickly here and there. Over here, the yellow could pop a little bit more. If you find that your painting just is lacking a little bit of interest, you just add a little more contrast to it. Put some darks against some light colors and it'll make those light flowers really pop out. See, underneath here is really dark. Just here and there. And it's funny how all these random abstract shapes, they start to turn into an actual picture. You start to take a step back and realize, wow, that looks like flowers. When all you did was dab a few random colors, random shapes. See, that white is still pretty wet, so I'll leave that alone. And as I look back at my photo, you know, I might add some more details here and there. Like I'll take the brown, add some black to it, and maybe, you know, maybe there's a few little areas here and there that I could just scrub in some details, just giving the idea of some leaves and twigs. Over here too, just a little bit. That's pretty black. I think I could go a little darker right there. So I'm moving around the canvas quite a bit. There's a lot of elements. Yeah, just add a few little details. Right in here. This is pretty dark. Okay. I want to go back in and add some more detail into that bush. So I'm going to take my small brush and I'll take the green and the white and the yellow. So I'm noticing there are a few little highlights I might want to add back in. It's just constant adjusting. Remember, I want to make sure there's some water on my brush. That way the paint moves around a little easier. Make sure it has a nice fine point to it. And I want to add just a few little areas where the blades of the bush are being caught by that sunlight. Just a few little areas here. Let me go into that dark a little bit, add some more paint to my brush. Just go into that dark. Yeah. Just giving the idea of details. There will be more of these little highlights near the top of my bush. I really like how that looks. There's some interesting textures there. Okay. This side of the bush is definitely lighter. So I want to work in a few more little details here just to give it some shape. Just quickly doing these little lines just to give it an idea of there's this sun hitting right there. And I could go back and add different things. I think once this dries, looks like it's pretty close. That white can be broken up a little bit. Yeah, it's pretty dry. So I'm just breaking up these colors. The flowers that are closer are going to be bigger than these ones way back here. So I want to leave those colors, or those shapes, pretty big up here. You can see that my white isn't completely dry, but that's okay. Just blocking in these little areas. Take a little bit more paint, just add a few really dark spots, just to make those white flowers really pop out. Right there. Like that. Okay. At this point I'm kind of nitpicking. I'm just adjusting here and there. So I hope you enjoyed this. Have fun painting.